traditions, inspirations, and impact, we hope to explore how Sri Lankan heritage is both honored and innovatively transformed within contemporary design landscapes. Today we have experts from two trailblazing creative houses that have pioneered a fresh approach to the local craftsmanship, textiles, and storytelling. We most regretfully announce that Ms. Darshikirti Sena, representing Booty Batiks, is unfortunately unable to join us today due to a medical emergency. We will miss her presence and insights for sure. Moving on, before we begin, I would like to request all of you to think of and keep any questions that you might have until the end of our conversation so we can build a dialogue with the audience as well. All right, so without further delay, let me introduce the panel members to you. First of all, we have Ms. Vidurangi Gunaratna. She has been an integral part of Barefoot's design evolution for the past 11 years. She's a talented designer and an alumna of the Department of Integrated Design at the University of Moratuwa. Vidurangi's work preserves and enhances Barefoot's distinctive approach to color and texture in textiles, and her dedication to the artistry has made her a key figure in continuing Barefoot's legacy. We also have Sofia Sansoni, who is a pivotal person at Barefoot, blending tradition with a fresh approach. As a designer, she honors her grandmother's legacy while maintaining the founder's design ethos. By focusing on color, fun, and the iconic style of Barefoot, she balances artistry and functionality, which is integral to Barefoot's hand-woven textile legacy. We also have Uday Vikramasinghe, who is a lecturer, designer, and a co-founder of Art Room, a design studio merging artistry with modern functionality. He is currently pursuing his doctoral studies at London College of Fashion and University of Sri Jayewardenepura. He researches sustainable fashion futures and community-based textile practices with a focus on Sri Lankan craft traditions. Last but not least, we have Kasunjay Mana, who is an interior architect, art curator, educator, and a co-founder at Art Room, where he specializes in creating immersive spaces that blend contemporary design with Sri Lanka's rich artisanal heritage. His work is distinguished by attention to detail, using sustainable materials and traditional craftsmanship to craft interiors that tell a cultural story. So, let me go to the questions now to start our conversation. I'm going to focus first with Ms. Vidurangi. So let me begin by asking you, when we look at designs of Barefoot, whether it's a sarong, a textile, a piece of jewelry, a household item, or even a book or a pencil, we see and we feel the gravity of the stories they carry. Everything feels authentically Sri Lankan. How do you integrate our culture, this authentic Sri Lankanness, into your designs?
Good morning, everyone. Our founder, Barbara Sansoni, she was inspired by the flora and fauna where she lived, traveled, and in this island, and where she drew and painted also. So she mostly got influenced by Sri Lanka, the things in our country, and she traveled a lot, like to Yala and a lot of national parks, and there she saw animals, the seascapes, sunsets, and then she translated those into the loom as a geometric composition. So we also, to this day, follow her steps and taking her legacy forward. And as for the other products in our store, you mentioned pencils and the stationeries, and so we have a separate section called Sansoni Warehouse, which started from its inspection. And so how they work is they work with our local craftsmanship and artisans, and how they, where they have to show its uniqueness that's unique to Sri Lanka, and they'll have to work with the resources in the country, and that it's what it's make unique, right? So that's how the collaboration goes on, and that's why you feel our culture, see our culture, and you feel that authenticness in our store when you go in.
And I also remember at one point you mentioned that each product has a name. Each product comes with a name. So how does that work?
Yes, so as I told you before, so we design with inspiration always. So it always comes with a name. And so naturally there's a story building up behind it. And that adds the value also to our design. And we have a separate section to keep our archives to this day from Barbara's original samples. And so the name reminds us of the inspiration where it came from. So that plays a big part in our design process.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for that insight. Let me move to Uday now. So what does heritage mean to you, and how do you navigate the boundaries between innovation and tradition?
Right. Good morning all. I'm very happy to see my first lecturer here also, like Miss Ninel also here. So she is actually my art and craft lecturer, so I'm very happy to see her in front of me. Yes, when I move to the questions, heritage craft is actually, Kasun and me representing art and art room Ceylon. So our brand is more focused for the heritage craft and especially art. And especially we are focusing 5 key points related to the heritage craft. So I'll highlight that major key points as well. So first thing is actually, according to us, the heritage innovation is basically mainly preserving identity. We all have the culture, we all have the tradition, and there are some other very valuable insights as well. So we are more keen into the heritage preservation part. So that's the major point we have. And the second point is actually reimagine the past. We have the rich cultural heritage, and we have the resources, artisans, and the Barbara Sansoni and Inadi Silva, and there are so many legends as well, not only the artisans, right? So every time we are rethinking about all the artisans and the heritage we have. So that's the second part actually we have. And the third part is the sustainability. So mainly Art Room is mainly focused for the cultural sustainability as well as the economic sustainability. So there are some other sustainable pillars as well. But for this moment, we are mainly focused for the culture and our community. So that's the major 2 parts we are considering for this moment. The fourth point is actually cultural relationships, and so we are mainly focused for our cultural roots. And the fourth part is, the last part is the major part because we are focusing in the fusion of art and technology. So that's the innovation part we are discussing. So according to all these factors, so these points are mainly, we are considering under Art Room. So those are the points we mainly focus for heritage innovation.
Thank you for that elaborative and insightful answer. I think we would also like to move to Sophia now. My first question would be, you carry the legacy of one of the most important people in the textile industry of Sri Lanka, Barbara Sansoni. As a young designer, do you get inspired by her work and approach? Can you also tell us her way of thinking and practice? How does that inspire you on your practice?
I think there is a great collective of people who do carry on her legacy. It's not one particular person. It's Vidurangi, it's the design team, it's weaving, it's dye, it's everyone. And I think the reason how she's got to guide us so clearly is because she had such a clear vision with Barefoot from its conception. And it just made sense. It really did. Like, there's nothing much to stray away from it. She was very practical. You know, it started in 1964, at a particular time in Sri Lanka. So you adapt just very core ways of producing. And so it's not just design, it's working with people, it's uplifting people, it's making sure someone leaves skilled. Not just, people aren't machines, people are people. And I think that's the biggest part of her legacy, is that someone walks away skilled or having learned something or just being able to translate themselves onto textiles. Like, even though we have her guidelines, Vidurangi style is very much Vidurangi style. Each designer has their own identification, but I think that's how we carry her legacy forward. She's left us with such a great building block and guidelines. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophia. My first question to Kasun would be, it's somewhat connected to your blended role as an interior architect, art curator, and an educator. So how important do you think this collaboration is in the design process, this blending of different disciplines, the coming together of many different viewpoints, perspectives? How does that influence or inspire your work?
Good morning, everyone. So I think I'll focus on interior architecture, which is my primary thing, which I'm working on. So when you start designing, as like when you're designing a space, so my practice, I would always try to focus on the essence, as Vidurangi also mentioned, like, you know, a story is very important, as in, for example, if you take a house and a home, there's a two different, as in even with the same space, house becoming a home is where the story connects. So it's very important for us to understand our client and their behaviors and such. So understanding about the social, as in like social and cultural aspect, when you are designing, it's very important. So I can actually relate to, like, you know, because I've worked with Barefoot for different projects, and like, as we said, they said they have different names for their different fabrics. So when we work also, so that story is very important for us to connect each of these spaces. So I believe that when the craft and the heritage culture is like also is like, you know, a part of this whole interior business, as like in interior spaces, which is important. And also the culture changes from person to person, and like, you know, how they, like, you know, brought up, how they associate the people you engage. So when I'm designing, it's at the end of the day, they need to be, my client needs to be happy about it, right? As in like they have to live, as in like they need to be in this home rather than a stereotypical house, right? So then the legend continues. So I think I have answered your question.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Kasun. Okay. So then we come back again to Vidurangi. But also I would like to remind you, I'm sure that you're getting questions, you're thinking of certain things that you can ask our panelists. Please make sure to note them down, and you can definitely bring them up in our Q&A session. My next question to Vidurangi is, what role does color and storytelling play in your work at Barefoot? How important are also stories to keep that fun and iconic style of Barefoot?
Yes, so when we are designing, as I told you before also, so we take our inspiration and so we can't weave curved lines. So it has always, everything has to be geometrical. And so we translate the design in a geometric shape to the loom. And we still work with color pencils and square rule books. So that allows us to use color intimately. And also when we draw the weft, the warp, the vertical lines, we can cross the weft on it. We can draw the weft on it and see how the colors merge. So we don't use computers and softwares to design. So it's always exciting and interesting to draw and color by hand.
That's so interesting to know how you're still engaging with this and keeping it more intimate, as you said, which is super interesting.
Yes.
I think I would also like to ask, continuing from that question from Sophia, so talking about this being intimate or like keeping with the roots, as a company, Barefoot works with skilled craftsmen and families. This has been going on for generations. Actually, I remember once we took our students to Barefoot and we met Dominic Sansoni there, and you mentioned how, you asked us a question, do you think we help craftsmen? And then I think some of the students nodded, and he said, no, they don't need our help, we need them. I remember this conversation from like maybe a couple of years ago. So how, I'm sure that you have built like such a strong relationship with them, and how do you work with the tacit knowledge that they have, like the knowledge that they've been transferring from one generation to the other? How do you integrate that into your design process, technique-wise or design-wise? How does their knowledge support you?
I think, again, because Barefoot was founded with such intent of how to just function and how to interact with people, we've garnered relationships with that ethos in mind. It's very symbiotic, and I think one of our longest collaborations have actually been with the Somawansa family. So they're a weaving family from the Uda Dumbara Valley. So they specialize in Dumbara weaving, and we've had that for over 35 years. And you know, people are like, oh, do you have them like locked under a contract or something? I mean, we don't. It's simply just mutual respect, and I think that's what's most important for us. We provide them with yarn because we're fortunate enough to be able to have our dye plant, have our water treatment plant, have so much love pour in from just conception of yarn, to share that with people who appreciate it and produce the most beautiful things is in itself an essence of Barefoot. And also just to create more craftspeople and artisans is, there's no factory lines at Barefoot either. If someone starts a toy, they'll finish it themselves. So that's why I think if you've ever gotten an item from Barefoot, you might have a name of someone on it. So each bag, each toy was started and finished by one person, and it's completely unique to them. And that's a skill you can't take away. And weavers come to us untrained. We train weavers ourselves. Some do come trained. And it's that partnership, they're so unique. If you see how people weave, they all have their own rhythm. It's like they all have their own dance. It's just, I think you need to have that appreciation. I think it's also just to appreciate craft and to appreciate skill first is, I think, very important. Yeah.
Such an interesting approach, and and again, this idea of working closely, the idea of collaboration. Thank you so much, Sophia. I will move on to Uday now. How does sustainability, being a buzzword currently, taking different forms, taking different shapes, how does that integrate into your work? As in, maybe when you are kind of like your approach with craftspeople or craftsmen, or your approach when it comes to the design process, how does sustainability play into your brand?
Yes, actually, very interesting part. Like I think previously there is a small slide you can see in the screen as well. If we can show the same slides, I can explain through that as well. So mainly the art room is like mainly focused for the sustainable approaches. As I mentioned before, like mainly economic sustainability as well as the cultural sustainability. Right. So the background shows the art room approaches for mainly for the heritage innovation part under the sustainability. So the first part, I think. The Barefoot also explained the same thing. So the collaborative agency, so that key point is mainly, so we work with the artisans, and artisans actually work as an agency. It's not like another set of craft people. So when I start my doctoral research, actually my two supervisors were there. So they actually asked me, the one sentence in my proposal mentioned that I wanted to grab the knowledge of artisans. So then he specifically mentioned how you grab the knowledge. Don't use that word because that one is too unethical. So then I removed that word, and then so then I started to thinking about how collaborate with artisans. Like it's actually not like the same thing. Actually, Vidurangi also mentioned, and Amani also highlighted. They visited to the Barefoot, and the highlighted major point as well. So then artisans, so our artisans, art room artisans are work as like agency, because we are not restricted them. They can work for other artisans as well, not only for us and other designers and other organizations. They can work anywhere, not only for us. We don't need to restrict them. So it's actually work as an agency. So then the major second point is the ethical facilitation. So mainly under the ethical points, so art room, we are not introduce any new materials or new colors or any new approaches for artisans. We are working with them. We should identify their knowledge, as you mentioned, the tacit knowledge mainly, and we work with the tacit knowledge only. So we are not implementing, inventing new things to the community. So it may be a disaster in the future because they don't have the specific original idea then. So then we are working directly with them based on their tacit knowledge. And the third point is cultural continuity. So in this point, so this is also very theoretical approach is there. You know, the culture is the key, like cultural aspects. So then we are mainly rooted in the culture and their cultural potentials, and we are merging with their cultures with our modern approaches, design approaches. The fourth point is actually the major point, we are working with them as a collaboration. So that one is under theory, the collaborative co-creation theory. So then, and that theory, so we are working them with 50-50 collaboration for that innovation for crafts, not for the designing part, like, you know, the craft innovation part. So we are working with 50-50 collaboration. So then the innovation, craft innovation rights actually going with them as well as us, not only for us. Because sometimes, you know, most of the designers are, they are telling, we are using our artisans, not working with them, right? So I think we all have the same idea, but when she like highlighting how we work with the tacit knowledge and all, with how we closely work with the artisans, so this is also I investigated this pluralism theory under my research, so that one, you know, collaborative agency, under that I mentioned the theoretical aspect as well. So that one is the same thing. We already practice in our local culture, we are practicing the same theories, but it's not properly theorized. The previous session also we discussed, we are not good in writing and documenting and all, but in the local context, we are practicing these sustainable approaches. But now Western people, Western cultures, they are theorizing these things as like with the nice fancy terms. So that creative pluralism is the concept that we are already practicing. So then it means like we are co-creators with artisans, not like giving commands them. So that's the sustainable practice we have.
Exactly. I think you highlighted a lot of important points and attitudes and approaches that even I'm sure that many of our young designers today, like the design students, can take things from for their practice as well. Actually, I think you answered my next question as well, which I was going to ask. How does the academia, you come from a background of academia, and how does that work? How does that help into your creative process? But I think we got the answer for that question as well, so thank you very much there. So with that, I think we can move again to Kasun. I want to talk about one example of your work, Artroom's work. When you design for sometimes, when you translate stories into visuals, how do you take this to a bigger audience? For example, I want to talk about how you designed outfits for Ridhma Veeravadana, for example, right? For his performances. Then you're not only creating for Ridhma, but you're also talking through his audience, through your design. So how does that work? How does the creative process work when it comes to connecting with a bigger audience?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, I'll just give a brief introduction of our brand. As like, so you must be wondering, like, two people talking about like stories. So Uday and I are good friends, and then like, you know, I'm from interior background and he's from fashion and education background. So this collaboration happens over when we were having a conversation, and we were like, since I was interested in fashion, and then also I had a little bit sense of business. So then I was like, okay, let's start a brand. So throughout the process, as like, you know, it was an initial like a conversational thing, and then what we did was like we were doing different practices. As in like first it was not commercial based, as like no economical. We was just doing it for fun. So it was more avant-garde based, and then so literally it moves to different ways. So anyway, the focus was always based on craft, as in so it was. Whatever we designed, it was some sort into craft. And throughout the process that we realized, like the normal process, what we do is, as a designer, we design, and then we go to an artisans, try to execute what we designed. And then what we realize is like, at the end of the day, we might not be able to execute what we really want, as in, because there's this. So that's where we understood there is something called tacit knowledge, as in, so how we, like, you know, how we, again, according, how do we understand that? How do we practice? How do we try to, like, execute our ideas? And then through that process, we realize this, as Uday mentioned, that how we get that knowledge, as in like, you know, how we incorporate that knowledge and then utilize it to our own design, contemporary design, right? So as Amani asked, like particularly Ridhma's outfit, which is done for his AHA concert, which it's like, you know, so there's this concert happening again in December. So this particular concert was based on his story, so his experience. as I mentioned, all our pieces, like all our designs also have this whole story and experience. So therefore, we did discuss about it. So mostly the design part is handled by Uday, and then I'm there to just to talk about it. So what happened was, so this whole conversation, and then how do we like Ridma is like a young artist, which is like, so same age as us, and like try to do new things, new music, some like, so it's a different, completely different audience. If you really talk about something which is like, just grabbing that audience is a very, like very tricky thing. It's like, so if you really look at, when you say craft, so we look into much more stabilized and mature audience, but like, how we work with and implement this particular crowd. So what we did was, for that we adapted this particular logo of him, and then we tried to incorporate that into a modern silhouette along with the craft, as like, a batik. So with that, the silhouette is as like, we worked with the artisans, the design, but the execution is like the development of the fabric was done as the 50-50 collaboration. So there is this innovation happens there. As Uday mentioned, we are not trying to always change the artisan's practice, as in like, we give that value to them, because what happens, like if we start, okay, for example, if you talk about an embroidery, so there are standard embroidery which we have like, so looked into. If you start try to develop a new embroidery, so then they'll start developing, as in they'll start using that, and then what would happen is like that particular tacit knowledge which they gain will be replaced by this new technique. So it might be like, as a designer, I might think it's cool, but it might be not the, like, the craft might, like, it might not have this age, as like might not last forever. So that's one of the things which we are very concerned when we are doing the practice. So again, get back to the thing, as like in the story where, so through, as in the appearance, the silhouette, and then the fabric development, within that, the greater audience visualize it, because the main thing is like, the visuals, how do you look into appearance, and then, so they would start looking at it, and they would start appreciating it. Through that, what we do, like, so then the audience getting bigger, and then people start appreciating, oh, craft, oh, there's a possibility in this. So if you say a batik dress, this is not like the normal batik dress. Is it batik, or is it a print, or like there's this conversation start, and that's, as I said, as an experience, as in like, so experience gives us stories, yeah. So and then that story continues. So yeah, I think that's about.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. I think I will take one of the key words that you said, which is experience, and then revert back again to Barefoot. The experience at Barefoot is extremely unique. The experience that you get, the surrounding, the olfactory senses, what you see, what you feel. And connecting with that, I wanted to ask, so as we have established already, you all work with the craftsmen and you all make these beautiful things, but you also cater to a bigger audience, bigger consumer base, people who are buying from you, who are not necessarily restricted into one segment, which is like, let's say, we can't say it's only Sri Lankans, but it's quite diverse. So how does that taste work so well with the Barefoot aesthetics? How do you maintain that your identity will cater, the brand identity, your work will cater, connect rather with this bigger audience?
Right. I just want to say, I think Barbara has already made Barefoot as a brand, and she herself is a legacy. So I would say our tradition, technique, and design is loved by foreigners and as well as locals. And we don't do just design. What we design have always serves a purpose. And you won't see our colors anywhere else, because we have our own dye recipes developed by Barbara herself with our dye master, Jeremy Mergen. And he has been worked with Lucky and Ina De Silva before us. And now we have a new dye master called Dimuthu, and he's working with beautiful natural dyes these days. And I would say, as for the techniques, we use the simplest form of weaving, the plain weave, but we make it interesting with using different yarn counts, and sometimes we double the yarn, warp and weft, to get the depth and the perspectives on the design. And also we mix the yarn, and we try to always build a new composition with using colors and proportions. So I think that's what it makes unique and interesting.
The core identity that you have already created that resonates with the entire audience. Thank you so much, Ridurangi. I think I have one more question also for Sophia. You host various exhibitions and events at Barefoot regularly. And how do you employ these settings to celebrate and communicate the Sri Lankan culture and identity with the visitors and participants of these events? And how important are these events in a contemporary setting to take your message, to take your brand's identity to the consumers or the audience?
I think, again, going back and even echoing everything they've said as well, I think the most important thing is to collaborate with people who you resonate with, like genuinely resonate with. And I feel like if you have an air and if you practice a certain way, you tend to also attract people who appreciate it and share those same practices. I wasn't alive when this happened, but I know I keep hearing about this dance/exhibition show that happened with the Chitrasena dance group. I think it was in the 1990s. But they danced at Barefoot, and they danced to the sound of weaving, just the sound of the shuttle and everything. And I think things of that nature is always so special. I mean, you talk about collaborations. Vidurangi mentioned Jeremy Margin. Jeremy Margin first started out actually working with Ina De Silva and Lucky Senanayaka. And it's just, we used to be so collaborative as a country, and I think we had such a really deep history as a country where we do sometimes tend to forget, or we love to sometimes just be in our own little corners. But I think being collaborative with best interest for both parties, like just for fun. I think fun is the biggest thing. Fun and color is Barefoot's core, and when you attract things of that and work with people like that, I think fun is the most important thing, and everyone just feels like they've got something out of it. Yeah, I think that's what we try to attract and go towards. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the one sentence that you said, again, we used to be so collaborative as a country. I think that is one such true statement that things maybe changed in the recent past, but then again, you as creative houses are kind of like, trying to maintain, trying to make sure that that is taken forward, the idea of collaboration. So before we move on, maybe we could open the floor for Q&A session. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Oh dear. I'm like really old, so I have like a colonial hangover. But when I say colonial hangover, it's the Arab people who came, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Chinese. We were on the Silk Route. So what exactly is our cultural heritage? I'm really interested in that question. And did we absorb things from the people who came to this country? And should we keep using that or working with those things and or those ideas that they brought to us? Or should we just go back to our kings and Buddhism for our inspiration? Thank you.
Should we direct that question to there, maybe? Oh.
Yeah, a very interesting point she actually highlighted. When we start our research, so as I mentioned, Art Room is more focused for the experimental design works. So we started a research from the Dumbara, the weaving. And when we are researching about the Dumbara motifs and all, so we can identify the same exact patterns from the Scandinavian hand knitting patterns as well. So very similar, very exactly similar. So then not only that, there are some other patterns and all as well. So then we figure out like in designing, so I don't know, we have to refer some literatures as well. However, we can see the very mutual potential and mutual languages are there in designing and the craft as well. So then, so maybe with the culture, religion, and there are so many factors actually into that merging and integration. So it's designing and the craft, heritage, we can see the common language as well. So it's very interesting to start a discussion, maybe like further. So we can have a very interesting findings after that, because she mentioned like with the religious factors also directly affect for the craft as well, for the developments. So we can, so in our craft, our heritage, we can see the potential for like future innovation based on these integrating factors, because now we are on the integrated design platform, so that integration is actually we can see the heritage crafts as well.
Anything to add?
And all, like, it's also what I feel is like it's also again a sort of like a collaboration. If you really look at it, it's like it's just from back then, like so someone sees like we take batik. Like batik is not a Sri Lankan thing, but it is so Sri Lankan right now. Like, so if we say batik, like everyone's like, oh, it's a Sri Lankan craft, but it is not a Sri Lankan, it is from Indonesia. But the adaptations, the collaborations, the motives, and like, if you really look at Ina De Silva, like how she changed batik because adapting local lessons and then sort of bringing foreign craft, and then made it more for like very local about it. So it's sort of like, what we are trying to do is also something similar, but our practice also, what we do is like right now we do consider these are our heritage craft after like, coming with this whole evaluation. And what we try to do is like we are trying to collaborate these craft within, as in, so batik and embroidery, how we can bring these together. So crochet and knitting, so those sort of things, crochet and batik. So that's what we are like. And also, I would like to add now, if you really look at architecture, interior spaces also, if you take temple murals, when, as an example, if you take Karagampitiya temple, if you really study about the temple mural, so there we go there and then we talk about this whole, so if you take a preaching hall and we talk about, so this is so Sri Lankan, this is so Buddhist. And then if you really look at it, there's so colonial adaptations, like taking off golo lamps and like, the clothing and the, like, so there are, so that's the sort of like, so back then when whoever drew it had that adaptation, as in had that experience with that particular community, particular culture. So from that they'll start adding. So again, that's a conversation. What is Sri Lankan architecture? So it actually evolves, I believe.
I think it built up such an interesting dialogue and like the questions to be asked. Yes, I think we have another point from Ms. Ninaya.
I'm glad that all of you have worked with craft people and are trying to, you're trying to learn from them as well as contribute, which is a good sign. But I would like to find out what are the problems, if there were any, when you're working with traditional communities that maybe the students can gain something from it, if there are problems and how you may have dealt with them.
I think one thing that I find, so barefoot still is exclusively handloom. I think weaving is probably one of the coolest things you could ever do. Like the way you have to use your entire body. It is not just your body, it's your mind, your eyes, your everything. If you see a loom, you try to count with it, I can't keep up. I think that's incredible. And I'm sad to see not a lot, it's going out of fashion in a sense. I think more people should get into practical crafts, and I think that's something Barefoot is trying to preserve in a sense. We'd like, if a young weaver comes in, we'd love them to stay on. We'd love them to come and stay a while. We'd love to have them honor their work. Going back to the Somawansa family, they actually now have their 4th generation, a young man who's, I think he just turned 22. Now he's doing the most incredible Dumbura weaving like I've ever seen. And it's just, we try to honor him, and he thinks it's the coolest thing ever, which is also nice to hear. I think in that sense, I do feel a bit sad when people try to think, oh, it's not cool anymore. And we don't need another bigger lens telling us it's cool. We don't need the Western world telling us it's cool. It's just, I hope Sri Lankans can take back that ownership of, again, whatever melting pot we were in the past and how we come to where we are today. Take all that knowledge and own it. You don't need validation externally, and uplift our own craft from within.
So I wanted to tell one thing to the same question, because especially for students going for the researchers, for the communities, so they should pay more attention for the ethical consideration of when we are doing research on the particular community or any other communities. Because I can remember when I was in my undergraduate level, like the Situminasya also here, so he actually taught us the Eastern and Western philosophies, like differences. So especially when we are approaching to the local communities, like, Eastern communities, their approaches are different. So especially research methodologies, when we are taken from researchers, researching communities, so we have to be very careful. We don't, we can't ruin the community, especially for the researching. Especially, when we are observing, like we can specifically focus for the natural observations, or we can't destroy the natural systems for especially researching and especially interviews. We have to focus for very narrative interviews or dialogues like that, because we can't ask very specific structured questions from them, because sometimes it may be directly affect for the community. So we have to be careful when we are researching, especially in the communities, for the future innovation as well, because Western communities and especially we can see the Eastern community, Western communities as well, but they are replying methods and they are answering types and everything completely different than our communities. So then we have to pay more attention, especially in the researchers.
And also, just to add up a follow-up question about the challenges, following up with the same question about the challenges that you all face when you all are doing this kind of work. So Sophia mentioned how sometimes people can perceive nowadays like it's not cool anymore. So what efforts can we, or can you as creative houses take? I would like the answer from both the brands that are represented here, but I want to know what efforts do we take to communicate the stories behind your work to the audience in a setting that is like constantly changing and evolving, like very fast-paced. So how do we communicate the work that we enjoy so much?
I'll speak about barefoot personally in some sense. For one, we don't try to listen to global trends at all because again, it's just, that's forever changing. I think once you make something for a consumer, you've kind of already lost your way a bit. You should just create for the sake of creating and more so maybe for yourself or anyway. But what were we talking about?
How are we telling our stories?
Yes. And I think with that, in communicating all of that in terms of global trends and how to preserve and make people understand why. So barefoot, we haven't necessarily talked about all our processes as much as I think we should, because since conception, we just thought it was the right thing to do. We're going to invest in a water treatment plant, because why would you want to pollute water? You're going to get high quality dyes, because why would you want heavy metal in anything? You're going to want to invest in good yarn, because why would you want a garment that lasts a day or a week? I think also getting consumers to understand, spend that extra bit on a sarong that's going to last you 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it is. Invest in those spaces. Don't worry about trends. They come and they go. They're a trend for a reason. I think invest in something, support things that support people and support a greater economy. Like if you think about how many people touch yarn before it comes to you, but that's a whole community you're supporting. Focus on businesses like that, or collaborate with people who have that same thinking. I think greater people could do.
Same question, how are we communicating the effort, the massive effort that is behind the work to the people who might not be thinking that it is cool, as we spoke about?
No, so as she spoke about from the consumer side, also I think one of the main thing which we need to also start appreciating the artisans, and then giving them the confidence, because at the end of the day, it is all based on the economy, as in the living. So how do we get about in that sense, as in how do we address that? So using craft in design, or using this heritage innovation, as we're talking about, is nothing. It's very sensitive in that sense, because if you really look at it, how the consumers that we are catering is, and then also the artisans, and then their livelihood. How does that work? So I think so I am proud to say I'm an interior architect. So likewise, they need to be proudly saying, yes, I am a weaver, I am a batik artist, and I'm a craftsman. So I think Sri Lanka is evolving into that also, as how it used to be, but now people are into the newer generations as such. I think it's very important that we look into that aspect, and also giving appreciations, credits, and giving them that what do you say, the face which requires. So then it becomes the cool thing for them to be proud of. Yeah, do you want to add anything?
Okay, we can definitely go. I think I kind of continued from the question that Ms. Ninel asked, but we can definitely go for more questions from the audience.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to go back to the question that Nelun raised, which is, she was mentioning something about being colonial or post-colonial or something like that. Yeah, okay. I think we're on this magical island, and let's first, even if you just look where we are placed on the atlas, on the globe, what a celebration of communities and cultures we've had go through this wonderful island of ours for so many years. Yemeni silver craftsmen taught us how to make much of what we do with silver. So just thank you, Nelun, that was a great question. I think just celebrate all that we have over here. It's not a monoculture. think of it as the Singharaja with all that wonderful mix of trees there and everything else that goes with it. So I hope we will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic.
This is directed to all of you. I've noticed this, over the years about preservation of culture, heritage, and this for me has felt like even as a community, like politically as a country, has held us in this sense of, we don't have enough, so we have to preserve. We have to protect, we have to not let go. And that has been the sense with everything that our country has been through in relation to our religion or culture or heritage, all these things. There's this general notion among the general public, not just artisans or cultural heritage practitioners, about preservation. Do you think that if we change from this preservation to dissemination, cultural exports, would that change the way that we look at everything that we do? Would that be a difference for students also to think about, rather than preserving, how can we disseminate, how can we look at this as cultural exports as a sector? That's my first question. Second question is, you spoke about, this is also coming from my personal experience with one of the brands I was asked to help with, and I could only work with them few years ago, working with craftsmen. I could only work like few days only into it because I saw the margins that they're keeping. And how do you look at this economic justice when it comes to the craftsmen? How do you share equitably, not just the process of making things 50-50? How do we make sure that, how do we address these issues while preserving the crafts and also empowering them? What does it mean that to empower them as craftspeople?
Shall we take the first question yet?
So that's again, as in, so preserving, as in that word, which is like, that's very, how do you say, as in, I don't think we, like, both the brands are trying to say that, oh, we are trying to preserve the culture. I think what we are trying to do is, yes, there is this great thing. What we are trying to do is, like, we are not gonna ruin it. So there's a small, as in, like a difference, preserving and not damaging it. So, so I don't think both the brands are practicing that, as in that sense. Because I know what you are trying to ask is that we're like, oh, yes, generally, but like, that's a general notion of like, oh, this is, we need to protect this and this is what we are. I think that's where we are actually stuck and we don't move forward. I think, so it needs to be like, it needs to be, as I said, yes, we have this, we are proud of it, and then how do we work about, right?
I also think, honestly, words like culture and craft and all these things, I feel like only came into like rotation in the last 5 years or something, I think it was just practically, again, the thing to do. And I think personally with Barefoot, there is a limit to production. We're not a mass-producing entity, and I think that's a great thing. I love that there's a ceiling we can't go past. Instead of trying to go past that and turn your ways, it's just be like, no, use that to your advantage. I don't think because craft can't necessarily go out in masses, because then it's no longer craft. I think that's a bit of thinking that needs to change. And again, I go back into when you're preserving, or like I think you said it best, and even when you said people can embroider a certain way, the moment you try to change that, then that's gone. In a sense, it's just sharing knowledge. I think that's the main thing. And also saying, hey, this simple thing like a plain weave, it's the simplest weave and it works and you can create so many beautiful things. We don't have to overcomplicate something. Craft is simple, you're using your resources, you're using your land. It's as simple as that. I don't think the moment you go to overcomplicate it is where things go awry. And the moment you try to commercialize it, not into that either. That's not what it's for. It's meant to be a practical act. It's a craft. Yeah. I think that's.
And also, it's the understanding of, with the artisan and the designer, who you are working with. Like we at Barefoot, we don't pressure our viewers. They're very happy when we speak about our technique, they're very happy working with the plain wave. But if we pressure them to do more intricate weaving, and they would not like it, because they're used to work with color, and they're very responsible of what they make till it comes out of the loom. Then they make sure that nothing goes wrong when they're weaving. So, and they're very proud of what they make at the end. So I think understanding the artisan is also most important, not without pressurizing them. And it's a collaboration, actually.
Shall we also go to the second part of the question, which he asked about financially empowering?
I think exploitation is, again, not the way to go at all. If you need, it's a partnership, it's collaborative. You treat them like any other person. That mutual respect needs to be there. And I think that's something, it's a great thing to pressure businesses to do. I will say that. I think it's good to question, good to be like, what are these people getting out of it? But also just, that can look, I'm going back to what we do with Dumbara, for example. You know, we're also collaborative in the sense we don't just give them yarn, but it's a nice thing for us, we know we're able to do. And I think just without paying craftspeople well, without paying artisans well, it'll die. So I think, but also then focus and respect the businesses that, or like not respect, but more like patron the businesses that do, because that's how it keeps going as a cycle.
I'm answering for the both questions together, Patum. So this is more like I'll give you an example. So very interesting point you highlighted, you know, the economic side and the preservation. So we are actually promoting technically the preserve is like, you know, the document and the preserve and safe, and that's the major idea. But we are promoting the preservation is not only the documenting, like we are empowering them, and we are open up the opportunities for them as well. So this is actually one example. So this is actually, the idea is coming from Dr. Sumantri. So she just finished the PhD, and then when she joined for the department again, then we have had a chat with the PhD and blah, blah, blah. Then, so she told like her PhD is mainly for the typography, and your subject also more aligned to that. So then, so my subject is more textile and all. So then art room, and we started the experiment after her initial idea. So we saw some potentials from different textile communities from Dumbara, Beeralu, and knitting, like all the craft communities. They had good potential with creating the text characters, like typography or something, like fonts, akuru, right? So that thing. The Dumbara community also, they can weave the fonts. The Beeralu community, they also can craft the fonts. And knitting community, they have a technique, block knitting. They can also do the typography thing. So then we realize we identify the potential and their knowledge, but they are not practicing that thing. So then we ask them to start the Sinhala Hodia to knitting and Dumbara weaving and also Biralu lace. So then we realized they can do. Like, so after that we implemented that idea. So we preserved that idea. So now the community and the same set of people, 3 communities, they are producing the products and exporting as well. So then it's directly come to the like income to that community, not for us. But the concept is generated for us. But we had a collection and we promote that idea as a new experimental idea, but the benefit is directly come to the community. So then the both that aspects are actually like fulfilling. Yeah, I think.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes.
Not a question, but a key word that came out is preservation, but I don't know, maybe craft, if it is to survive, it has to evolve, I feel, maybe what you do, and otherwise it can die out if it's just a matter of preserving it. All over, I mean, being an island and having so many infusions from different cultures, whether it's Chinese or Indian or Moroccan, they have always been absorbed and interpreted. So we and our craftspeople, as we saw yesterday in discussion of the Hansi Putua, they did not just copy it, it evolved to our conditions. And therefore, maybe it survived. So the same thing, maybe we should add the word evolve, but with due respect to the traditional craft, and also what we do should not, in the future, annihilate it. But if it is, new crafts, you can do anything, and they will absorb the, if it's not traditional craft, but modern crafts, I feel, you can do anything. But one has to be careful with traditional crafts.
Yeah, so it's basically what I think all of us were trying to say as an example. You need to know the alphabet before you start like making words. As in, when you know the alphabet, you can do any sort of words, new words and so on. So if you start only focusing on the words and you forget the alphabet, and then you'll be stuck with that one particular word, and then that will only last for a few times. So I think that's what we are sort of trying to explain.
Any more questions from the audience? I'm sure we have like a lot of students here today as well, and you have the opportunity to ask any question from the 4 panel members. From one student, at least. But just to add up, I think the points that you all mentioned about, for example, we had this vision speech yesterday from Professor Sarita, and she mentioned her research was focused on what Ms. Nina also said about the planter's chair, and how that also came up as a part of like resistance towards a lot of mass-produced industrial work, the designs that everyday objects, how everything was looking super similar to each other, and there was no room for human error. The fact that Sophia said, like, for example, you make everything, one person is going to make everything from the very beginning to the end. So I feel like this panel discussion also continued from a few places that we left yesterday. Do we have any questions? Yes. can we give the mic to Basa?
Thank you. So my question is from Mr. Uday. So my question is, what are the worst possible outcomes that could happen if we implement new or the contemporary ideas to artisans? So my question is, what are the worst possible outcomes that could happen if we implement new or the contemporary ideas to artisans?
Yeah, yes, very. So now, so you can see everywhere that thing is happening, right? Especially for the craft people. So I believe, like, this is my personal idea. So worst thing is actually the most of the communities, like we can see the generations. We can see then, especially in the Biralu, and you know that craft is not like much generation, but it's started from the colonial period and like that. But you know, Dumbara, we can see the generational artisans as well. Like from long time ago, we can see it's evolved, as Miss Ninel said. Like the community-wise, we can see the differences. We can't treat every communities for same way. Like we have to take the different approaches to work with them, right? We can't equally treat for each community. So then the worst thing is actually the traditional aspects or their unique potentials will be ruined if we are not properly and ethically treat for them. Like, you know, as example, one particular community is there, like maybe Dumbara community, let's take that. So now the 6th or 7th generation is there, according to my knowledge, right? So if I'm a designer, so I can go there and implement new materials, new techniques, new tools, new things and everything there. And they can, because it's commercially very viable, like they can earn money, they can sell their products like very nicely and they can earn very good profit margin. So then they are more into that because they can earn money, no? Then profit is there. But after 3 or 5 generations, so the new generation, they don't have the exact idea about the past values and their original techniques, original craft versions and preservation methods, anything, they don't have any idea. So they normally move on with the new versions. So it may be directly disaster for the innovation part as well and the evolution part as well. So I think that's the most dangerous and disaster for the community, because if you want to add new thing or implement new thing, then you have to create a proper strategy or a mechanism. So how to preserve, how to innovate, and how to protect, and how to come up with new ideas. So you should have a proper strategy for that. So that is my personal idea. Exactly, yes, that's true.